Hello and welcome back to my channel. I recently made a remix of Dua Lipa's Houdini based on the sound of 80s era Queen, which you can check on my social accounts. I thought this could give us a great chance to dig deeper, go through the decision-making process that I've had throughout making this remix, and again give you more explanation about the instrumentation and the arrangements of this track. In the previous video that I've made, I've categorized my song analysis based on two main groups. One of them is the songwriting and one of them is the building blocks. When I do a remix like this, I usually like starting with the building blocks. One thing working in my favor was the proximity of both songs' tempos. Dua Lipa's song is at 117 BPM, while Queen's is at 112. I made a conscious choice to match Queen's tempo and reduce it to 112 BPM. The tempo of the song can really place you within the feel and the mood you're looking to achieve. One problem I've experienced was that the two chord structures were not very identical, not so much in terms of the actual progression itself, but more in terms of the actual feel they conveyed. Okay, let's talk about the different chord structures. Dua Lipa is in D minor and she's got this D minor into G minor into C progression, which is nice. It's a progression that's designed to make people move and bounce. But Queen had these really big epic chords like... And you can see how they sustain longer. Yeah. I realized that if I wanted to bring Dua Lipa's song into Queen's realm, I want to let these chords breathe a bit more. So I did something like this. It's a D minor into B flat, again giving it a space into G minor, back into B flat, into this little run between B flat and F. Okay, after being brave and tempering with the song's chord progression, I felt like it was a good time to start fleshing out the elements. So I started by programming a straight 4 on the floor kick drum from my lean drum kit that comes with Logic. It sounded good, but I did notice one thing. This kick drum has an amazing attack and it cuts through every mix, but it was lacking a little bit of depth. So I decided to layer an acoustic kick drum sample. Moving on to the snare drum, I opened another instance of my lean drum samples and laid a really simple snare downbeat, which sounded like this. Again, it was nice, already gives you this crunchy 80s feel. Knowing I'm within the 80s realm, I've opened multiple digital reverbs within my DAW to enhance the drum sound. When I went back and forth to Radio Gaga, I've realized that something was missing. The first thing I've noticed is that in Queen's song, the top end wasn't as harsh. That's probably down to the fact that they've recorded onto tape. The tape saturation that was occurring, plus some sort of degradation of the reels themselves would cause that. In order to achieve a similar effect, I've loaded an instance of Arturia's Mellow-Fi plugin, and it sounded like this. With my digital reverbs and tape saturation on the snare drum, I thought I was underway, but I've noticed something was still missing, and a closer listen to Queen's song made me realize that they actually had a slap delay on the snare. So I opened one of my favorite plugins, the Echo Boy by Soundtoys, and I loaded a really simple mono slap delay, and it sounded like this. Now again, in a similar fashion to the previous video, I had this drum beat, which was solid, but it was time to make it more lively. So in this instance, I felt like all I needed was a bit of hi-hat. Now, if you notice, the hi-hat accents the 8 beats. In order to bring more swing to it, I added a shaker track that's accenting the 16th beats. With the shaker, I loaded a different tape plugin called Dirty Tape by Softtube. It's a very similar plugin to Mello-Fi, but what I like about Dirty Tape is that it gives you, again, a really quick result. It just trims off the top end in an instant way and shaves off all these harsh transients, and it's my go-to plugin on percussions. Remember, kids, the main aim in the current decade is not to upgrade the sound, but to degrade it. Radio Gaga has a really iconic bass synth sound that starts from the intro of the song and goes throughout it. A short research showed me that it's likely that Queen used an Oberheim synth in the studio. I don't currently own an Oberheim, but I do have a software emulation of it by Arturia. Using even just an emulation of the original sound helped me to get to the ballpark and find a really similar sound fairly quickly. All I had to do is tweak the filter and a bit of the resonance, and I was in the ballpark. I didn't want to go into too much menu diving, so I simply loaded Logic's MIDI effects. They have a built-in arpeggiator that's extremely useful, and again, it was really quick to just get that progression going. All that was left to do is load an instance of a dotted 8 delay, and it sounded like this. In order to make sure my low end was in place, I layered a bass track using this lovely Rickenbacker, just playing long root notes. I recently read how the bass sound on Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer was created. Apparently, they've used a mix of some chorus effect and an octaver. I've used an instance of IK Multimedia's Triangle Chorus, while also sending the bass into a separate aux containing an emulation of the classic Juno chorus. And like Peter Gabriel's song, I also added a small amount of an octaver set to the octave below. It could sound a bit creepy on its own, but when sprinkled in moderation, it sounded great. One of the main elements that pop out in Radio Gaga is those chiming chords you can hear in the beginning of each bar. Initially, I turned to my analog synth rack and tried utilizing the Pro 800 for a classic analog pluck sound. It sounded good and I kept it, but I realized that there was still something missing. After a closer listen, I realized that it was quite possible that Queen used a harpsichord sound or even just a sample. Doing that made perfect sense, and both these sounds worked really well with each other. We were in business. In order to wrap up the playback, I played some big, wide piano chords on my lovely upright piano here. Again, complementing that orchestral feel that Queen always had such strong leaning towards. Next, it was time to change the vocal track from Dua Lipa's voice to Freddie's voice using lalal.ai. And this is it. This is my remix of Dua Lipa's Houdini, made in a style of 80s era Queen. Feel free to watch the other videos in my channel if you enjoyed this one. Also feel free to check out my Instagram page that has a lot of other short form videos and content that you might find interesting. If you have any more questions and comments, feel free to leave them below in the comment section. As always, feel free to like, subscribe, share, hit the bell button, hit me up, and thank you very much for watching. Bye.